Okay, now I have to be nice. Welcome to the real Thomas Jefferson. Oh wait, was that where I was supposed to roll my
You-
R?
You're not, you're not nice all the time. Is that it? You're telling our viewers that you have bad days?
I never have bad days.
Okay, that's what we want to hear.
Yes, I
You're the
have good days.
positive one. You're
I'm a
the
happy.
optimist here.
I am an optimist. I'm very happy, and I am. I will not allow anything to defeat me.
All
So,
right.
okay, the real Thomas Jefferson episode. Let's see, my Roman numerals 25, 6, 28. Wow.
I figured that might be a slight challenge for you. We start getting into the upper 20s. So
I know, can you just use the, okay. So Thomas Jefferson and John Adams debate concerning the natural aristoi. Did I do it right?
you even trilled your R perfectly there. Nicely done.
Oh, now I'm going to roll every R. So thank you so much, Dr. Holochek, for sharing your expertise that we cannot get anywhere else to your quality. So I really appreciate you taking the time to educate our viewers on the real Thomas Jefferson, who he was
I'll send you the check for that comment.
as a man. It's so nice because I think he's very misunderstood. So Dr. Holochek, the Colonel, Colonel Holochek, is in the midst of a book on the philosophical aspects of Jefferson's correspondence with John Adams. The book will cover issues such as the nature of God and the cosmos, religion, the good life, political philosophy, oh, my favorite topic, and the natural aristoi, the function of grief, wow, and the worth of life. Wow, this is going to be another, your 29th?
Yeah, it will be. And it's a lot of fun to do so far.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're having fun. In that book, he has recently returned to Thomas Jefferson and John Adams on the natural aristoi and has more to say on that issue than he has in prior publications. No way. You have more to say? I would have never thought.
Well, you know what? People say, how can you write 29 books? It's just when you penetrate deeply into something, like I'm doing with the letters, you start seeing things you missed. Even though you've
Oh,
honed this over and over, there are things you miss. And what we have to say, what I have to say today, I think is going to be very interesting. So, I'm just warning readers right now or listeners that they might find what I have to say here in this episode rather interesting, vis-a-vis in terms of shedding some light on John Adams more than Thomas Jefferson.
oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting. I know I still have a little grudge against John Adams, but anyway, okay, so the aim of this show, The Real Thomas Jefferson, the real Thomas Jefferson, is to get real about Thomas Jefferson, to revisit and revise the revisionists who are ever in the business of deconstructing Jefferson's prose, his letters, addresses, memos, etc. Nearly all Jeffersonian biographers today take it upon themselves to write of the Jefferson's protean nature or Janus facedness. What Jefferson says most often cannot be understood literally. His prose must be deconstructed, and so intuitiveness and knack are needed in preference to logical acumen. It is commonplace to call the man a hypocrite and even a contradiction. This show, then, aims to dispel that myth. Jefferson can be known, and logic, not intuitive, and discretionary deconstruction is the method. I
That
am
is
Donna.
that word logic is such a wonderful word. I taught it for decades and love logic. It just seems to me it's banned in this country from the
Oh,
progressive left. It's just I'm not picking on left or right necessarily because I'm
right.
neither, but it seems the left really hates that word. Let's just ban logic, right? We don't have to
Yeah.
think rationally.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing more today is based more feelings oriented, not logic. And I always thought I wanted a world that was more like that. Now that I got it, I don't like it. I
You
think I
don't
like
want
logic. I like
feeling
logic better.
orientation when it comes to certain things.
No,
Definitely not.
only an intimate relationship, that I think that's the only place for it. Anything else, when you're dealing with history, business, it really needs to be logic. Um, unless you're a social service worker, then it can be feelings oriented. Okay, so I'm Donna Vitek, and this is the real Thomas Jefferson, episode 26. No, 28. 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 28. 28. Yeah, I have a typo. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask, those who have followed our shows over the years know that Colonel Holochek has discussed Thomas Jefferson has had discussions of Thomas Jefferson on the natural aristoi before. Yet this time, the good doctor or good colonel or good whatever he is this week
Hey, cut that out. Let's
promises
stay
up
serious here. Can't have
a different slant. Can you explain what this different slant is?
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm planning to do in
In
this
2 minutes
show,
or less.
no, absolutely not. What I'm planning on doing is showing how the notion of the natural aristoi sheds light essentially on axial or the fundamental political differences between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. And also I want to show, I want to get at just exactly what those differences are. I'll bring up some screen share stuff we can look at. Jefferson starts the correspondence with, let me bring this up, with a letter on the 15th of June, 1813. And let me make that larger. And he brings up the topic of the fundamental differences between the two parties. And Jefferson's view is that, the Republicans were also very progressive. They bought into science. They bought into progress, as he says here, the improvability of the human mind in science and ethics in government. And then he says, on the other hand, the Federalists sort of deny that. They look to the past for political instruction, for how governments need to be run. And as Jefferson is his wont in the letters to Adams, as is his habit, he doesn't really blame Adams for that. In many places, he's going to blame the people in Adams' administration, right? The high Federalists for steering him afoul. And Jefferson said, "You won't really believe that, do you?" But Adams probably did. And we're going to see that there's considerable confusion in Adams' head on this issue, right? So I want to shed light on those issues. That's all. And the political differences.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear more. How many letters are there between the two that have a bearing on this issue?
Well, let me look, before I answer that, let's look at the letter that Adams sends to Jefferson in response. He says, "Checks and balances, Jefferson. You and your party may have ridiculed them, are only security for the progress of the mind," right? And what does he mean by checks and balances? We'll get at in a bit. Now, here are as I wrote on this before, I didn't scrutinize the letters as carefully. These are the number of letters from my digging that have a bearing on this issue. Jefferson begins on June 15th, most of which occur in 1813. Jefferson writes a letter prior to his death later on, 1824, prior to his death. But the purple letters are the ones by Jefferson. The red are Adams. Now notice, beginning on June 28th, Adams writes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters on the natural aristoi. He's repeating himself. And look at the dates on them: June 28, July 9, July 13, July 15, 2 days later, he's answering. August 14, September 2. He is dying for a reply from Jefferson. He's going to articulate his views. And Jefferson, he writes one letter, I think, after August 14, but he doesn't talk about the natural aristoi. And Adams is dying for Jefferson to say something. Adams thinks he finally has Jefferson. Jefferson's going to see his argument and realize, okay, whatever you want to say, Thomas, it's wrong. That's not the case. So these are the number of letters that have a bearing. We have 3 by Jefferson, 4, 8 by Adams, and that's typical in the correspondence. Adams writes so many more letters than does Jefferson. Adams needs Jefferson's love, affection, friendship.
Right, right.
There is a dependency there, even though Adams is an
Yeah,
old statesman.
yeah. To me, it was cute at one time until the transfer of presidency. But okay, are we ready for another question? Are you ready?
We are ready. Yeah,
Okay.
that's a succinct question. Answer.
Okay, then what is John Adams' notion of the natural aristoi? What is Jefferson's?
Here's John Adams' argument. Basically, John Adams is arguing for wealth in good birth. That's just what the natural aristoi is. I can say that without looking at. He's going to say that there is a natural aristoi. It's created by God. And among all the human beings, there is a group of people who are naturally born by nature, by God, superior. These are the natural aristoi. These are the people of good birth, the people who have the money, and generally the people who have the good looks.
Oh.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Jefferson's notion is going to be, he's going to cut to the quick and say, no, there is a natural aristoi, a natural aristocracy. They're based on virtue and talent. And by talent, he means roughly intelligence. Sometimes he calls intelligence genius, the same equivalent term for that time, and ambition. So we have remarkably different definitions of the aristoi.
Thomas Jefferson, maybe I'm wrong, but he's so idealistic.
No, you're quite right to say that. He really is. He's an idealist. And a lot of people say that, but I don't think he's a quixotic, like Don Quixote.
I knew you were going to do that. I said, don't say anything. He's going to throw a word out there that
Don Quixote, he's fighting, he sees windmills and he thinks they're giants.
Okay.
Jefferson is a ground idealist. You can be someone who has lofty ideals and yet be grounded in reality. Most of the time, I would say that. But he is, and Adams is a sort of, Jefferson is an optimistic idealist. Adams is a pessimistic, I don't want to call him a realist because sometimes I don't think he's a realist. He's just a pessimist, a grouchy, chuffy pessimist.
Okay.
How's that for a succinct answer?
What is each person's main argument for their position?
All right, here I go to the next slide. Adams says, this is not it says good birth and wealth have together ever prevailed over virtue and talent. I'm adding in brackets in political matters because I think that's assumed.
Right.
So good birth and wealth will ever prevail over virtue and talent, political matters. That follows. The one there in parentheses means 2 is a conclusion from premise 1, and 3, which is a conclusion from the statement 2. There cannot be any workable political system without inclusion of men of good birth and wealth. It's a very simple argument. It's appeal to experience. And in all of his letters, he's going back to the Greek past, the Latin past, the Roman past, and talks about people of always. He's going to say philosophers have these lofty ideals about virtue and intelligence, and yet when they marry their daughters off, they're looking for people who are good looking and well born and have money. So he's making fun of the philosophers. So it's an appeal to past experience.
Yeah, I never did understand that until I had children. And then when you see the choices that your children are making, sometimes then you wish you could, everything could be arranged. Or when you're trying to teach your children, you are the company you keep. So choose wisely how you spend your time and whom you spend your time. And
it's one of those issues, isn't it?
Yeah. So now I do understand.
But the funny thing is, you always want to allow a person of sufficient maturity the opportunity to make her own choice.
Right.
And
well, right.
But hopefully hopefully an informed choice.
And the other side is that even people that may come from not a good place and with really no good role models, if they deserve an opportunity to move up into I was going to say a higher caste, a higher, a better social position. Somebody shouldn't be stuck what they were born into.
Well, that's what Jefferson's argument's going to be, right? I assume you're going to ask the question, what is Jefferson's main argument? Because that's what I have a slide on next.
Well, I wanted to know, well, who has the better argument?
Well, hold on. We haven't done Jefferson's argument.
Okay.
But I mean, you actually hinted at the answer.
Yeah.
This goes back to Jefferson's moral sense. Now, Jefferson doesn't articulate it in explicitly, but it's implicit. And I break it down thus: humans are by nature morality sensitive creatures. All of us have an inborn moral sense faculty. We sense the right thing to do. We don't reason about it, Jefferson thinks. And he's following a long line of thinkers of his time: Hume, Adam Smith, and a number of other, Bolingbroke, and a number of others who believe that morality is sensed. It's not rational.
Well, Thomas Jefferson's never met a sociopath at this point, though, has he?
Well, some think he is a sociopath.
Or a narcissist. So, yeah.
Okay, humans are naturally inclined to be morality abiding unless there are artificial obstructions. And Jefferson says that, rationality gets in the way often. Political obstructions that favor the artificial aristoi impede moral actions, right? We have primogeniture, we have religious biases, political biases in political structures. We need freedom of religion. We need education. We have educational biases, so we need to get rid of these obstructions. Jeffersonian republicanism, government of and for the people through elected representatives, inter alia, among other things, is a political philosophy that is workable only if all such obstacles are removed. It follows from the four premises that Jefferson republicanism allows for unobstructed activity of moral agents. We add another premises: a government that allows for unobstructed activity of moral agents is the best form of government. Our ultimate conclusion for Jeffersonian republicanism is the best form of government. He'll talk of it, at least ideally here, as an experiment. Even if it's not, it at least needs to be tried, right? Now, that's Jefferson's argument for republicanism. He doesn't give an argument for the natural aristoi. He says there just are the natural aristoi, right, which are the people who are who are the more moral and more intelligent, more ambitious. Then he says there are the artificial aristoi, which is Adam's natural aristoi. Adam says birth, wealth, good looking, things like that, good looks are all the natural aristoi. Jefferson says, no, this is the artificial aristoi, and we need to do everything to keep these people from governing. Adam says these people have to be essentially part of government because they're the best. And Jefferson says, no, your natural aristoi is artificial. We need to keep them out of government. That's why we get into trouble all the time. Right? Because the people have the money, want to keep the money in their family. People have good birth. It's the same thing. They want to keep other people who are morality abiding and talented out of government. That perpetuates, the artificial aristoi. So Jefferson, so that we're getting right at the differences between the two men.
Wow, they, I always thought of them as best friends. They were so different.
And but Jefferson, and here I learned something from him too, and I mean this sincerely, is you don't have to think just like someone to be a friend. I think what Jefferson recognized, and I'll say this about my brothers, about you, about my best friend Chuck and others, is that there are certain people who don't think like me at all, but yet they're just good people. So you want to be around them, and you befriend them, and you stay friendly to them. And there are other people that I know as well. It's because we'd say today they have a good heart. if I'm in trouble, I can turn to that person.
Yeah.
And Jefferson recognizes for Adams is grumpy, churlish, he's egotistical, he's self-centered, he's got all narcissistic, he's intolerant of other people, and yet Jefferson recognizes he's got a good heart. Adams is his friend. I think that's something pretty neat.
Yeah, that is. That I like the way it was so eloquently put. So who has the better argument? I mean, can you really say, or is it just
Well,
going to be an opinion?
I let's just say, John Adams' argument is mightily confused, and I'll explain why in this last slide. And then I'll say, let's go back to Jefferson's argument first. Everybody is born with a moral sense. So if we go back to Jefferson's argument, we're all morally sensitive creatures. Now, are we all born with a moral sense? I don't think
No,
so.
no.
I think morality is more rational than it is sensitive. I may be wrong, but everything for Jefferson is built on this notion of a moral sense. People are inclined to and want to do good, all people. Now, how do you account for the prevalence
If Jefferson
of,
had ever watched his little daughter at 1.5 play with another child, he would have seen that they're not born with a moral sense.
or picking the wings off flies or pulling the legs off grasshoppers
And feeling and feeling nothing and laughing about it. Yeah.
Well, Maxim Gorky said the same thing. Dostoevsky, two of my favorite writers are Russian. Dostoevsky said, Christian sense of guilt. Whenever we do something bad, we always feel guilty and we wallow in the guilt. Many of his novels are based on that.
That has to be taught. The guilt is taught by Catholic parents.
Well, Dostoevsky doesn't think so. He just thinks it's part of it. But I would add that Gorky comes up and says it's astonishing the egregious things that people can do without the least sense of guilt. I'm with Gorky there. Now, so I mean, if humans are not, Freud says this in a number of his writings, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, that we have a death instinct, that we have an instinct in us for us to want to do, say, bad, we'd call bad things. And Freud's not being evaluative, he's not being normative, he's not saying it's good or bad, but we have a death instinct. So we have a desire. We enjoy going to war and killing people, in a sense, right? Because you think about it, he's probably right. What bigger rush can you have to be in charge of the life or death of another human being?
Right.
I'm not saying we should get a rush, but a lot of people go to war and enjoy it thoroughly because, man, it's, and soldiers say this a lot when they come back from wars. You don't understand it. I've said this before when I taught on war in philosophy classes. Soldiers that come back from war where they see action say, if they fill in the blank, war is the closest thing to blank. Heaven or hell, what might you think?
Hell.
They say heaven.
Heaven.
Not all people, but many of them say it's the closest thing to heaven. And that's part of the reasons why they don't get along back here, because people are fighting together, life and death. And if I'm in a ditch with you fighting, I don't care if you're male, female, black, white, green, or purple. Mm-hmm. My life depends, and we form a bond. And we experience the ultimate rush of knowing I could be dead at any moment, and yet trying to survive. And then we all of us go through that, and we form bonds that average people will never understand. Right. So, to go back, Jefferson's whole argument is predicated on this natural aristoi. Let's go to Adams, right? Adams claims, if you read his defense of the constitutions of the United States or his discourses on the Villa, he argues that persons are driven by passion, reason's not a driving force. Okay, and he says religion and education are singly totally inadequate to the business of restraining the passions of men, of preserving a steady government. In other words, reason doesn't work here, and protecting the lives, liberties, and property of people. Okay, I quote from here, he says, religion, superstition, oath, education, laws all give way before passions, interest, and power. So we have passions, we have interests, it means self-interest, and we have power. How do you fight passions, interest, and power? By passions, interest, and power. So if someone is behaving irrationally on passion, I need to have a stronger passion to corral him.
Right.
Now he says there's a God-given natural aristoi in the body of mankind to restrain, right? And he says the best government utilizes the best effect the powers of natural aristoi. The natural aristoi for Adams are the people of good birth, money, and ultimate power, right? Now, try to make sense of this because it doesn't make any sense. Adams always complaining, no one understands my arguments. Everybody complains and criticizes, and Jefferson's, they love it. But if there's no rationality, he says we have to bring these natural aristoi into government, right?
Yeah.
They're the most important. I'll stop sharing and go back to some of my notes. They're the most important aspect in any government of any sort, right? And so you bring them in. And the funny thing is what Adams says is, if I could find a quote, what he says on I have a quote on him here. Well, he says you bring them in and they're dangerous. They're very dangerous because, you know, if you can corral them, how do you corral? And you think of like a Senate, right? The upper classes, not a House of Representatives elected by the people. You bring in these people of good birth and wealth, and if you can corral them, you corral them by having an executive that looks down on them and having people in the House that looks up at them and keeps them in line. So because if you don't, they're going to be all over the place, and he literally says they're going to cause the government to fall apart if you just leave them alone. If you check them from top and below, here's my question. And you want to answer? Go ahead. How do you check them if the only check is not rationality, it's passion versus passion? If the natural aristoi are the most passionate, powerful people, how does an executive functioning on passion and people in the House who are not as powerful with their passions, how do they check them? How does irrationality check irrationality? That's the question.
Right. You can't.
Can't. And so, you know, Adams is arguing, well, people think I'm confused. They don't get my argument. You are confused, John Adams. This makes no sense. You want to bring this.
So I guess you answered who had the better argument.
No, I haven't, because one could argue that Jefferson is misguided as well for thinking people have a moral sense, that people basically Jefferson is arguing people are essentially good. And as Freud would say, and Freud may be right, others have said this before, people are neither good nor bad, but they have impulses to do good and impulses to do bad. Or Shakespeare would say, good or bad don't really exist. It's just we call things good or bad, and they're not really. And I think that's right. That's a Stoic notion. Yeah, I mean, so let's say Jefferson has an argument with a questionable premise that people are born good. And if people aren't born good, Jeffersonian republicanism probably is not going to work. And one could argue that it hasn't worked historically. All the historians say that. Jefferson was pie-eyed, starry-eyed, and he thought this is going to work. But if people are not moral agents the way Jefferson thinks, then it can't work because it is all bottom-up structured, right? It's all depending on the goodness of the people. To elect the right representatives, to oversee them, to care about each other. When we talked about the people have to oversee the governors and to, do the right things and minimal government, things like that. But it's all predicated on moving up from the bottom up, right? Having good families, good citizens, good people, having government that stays out of people's affairs. So Jefferson's got this questionable premise. Adams got a confused argument. I would give Jefferson the nod, at least because his argument's not confused. I mean, does that make sense to you? I mean,
yeah.
This is the surprise I have with viewers. I'm mulling through Adams' argument, and then I'm thinking, this is where logic comes in. I break it down in premises, conclusions, and you have to include the natural aristoi because that's how government works. It's great. This natural aristoi is so important but the problem is that if they're not in check, they'll run amok and they'll destroy the system.
Right.
And
I think that's what we're seeing today. Some of the people that have the power, it's the loudest ones, not the majority.
Yeah, but do you think this is where I think Adams is confused as well? Do you think that there is a natural group of people? Adams thinks that human beings are two sorts. People that are born with this power, with this drive, with good blood, which a desire to make money, a desire to mingle with other great people, and then there are the rabble. He doesn't think that people are just people and some rise to the top through their actions and their deeds. He just thinks some are born better.
Right.
God made them that way. Jefferson says, no, all people are born roughly the same. Give them an equal starting position. Some will rise to the top because of their virtue, hopefully, and their talents. And to do that for a good government, and I'm sympathetic with Jeff, we need to get rid of birth and wealth.
Well,
right.
My dog is, I would consider Baker to be the natural aristoi. This is funny that we're doing this topic because every morning I brush him, I say the same thing. I tell him, you are so fortunate you were born into the golden retriever breed. You are you are a privileged dog that you were born a golden retriever, because everyone loves golden retrievers and you're so beautiful.
And they're mild-mannered.
You're loving. A doggy of privilege. I tell them that you're a doggy of privilege.
Yeah. Well, Adams thinks that there are people that are like that are just like golden retrievers that stand out from other dogs. Jefferson says no.
I was getting to that point. Like, could it be the same for humans, that there are some that are just born into intelligence?
Well, Jefferson thinks so. Jefferson says some people have slight advantages in intelligence and perhaps slight advantages in moral sensitivity. That's by nature. And we want to encourage that because that makes society better. Adams says the people that happen to have the money and the power are the ones that are just born that way. Forget. Right. Because philosophers.
I think they're both right. I think.
Well, they can't be both right because these are antithetical positions. They're opposite. They're contradictory, or inconsistent.
But I think at times it can be what Jefferson's explaining, and part of society can be what John Adams is explaining.
Well, they have fundamental differences on the nature of human beings, so they both can't be correct. They're inconsistent views, right? In the same way that the colors black and white are at poles. You can't have both at the same time. They both can't be true. So, I mean, you could either pick what Adams says or pick what Jefferson. I mean, what occurred to me is Adams is proposing that there are people by nature. Imagine an ox that is super powerful, 200 years ago, and that if you just rein him up, and if you can corral him, he will plow your field in no time. Mm-hmm. The problem is that he doesn't like to plow, and he can destroy your whole barn. He'll knock your barn down. He'll knock your house down. Mm-hmm. Right? He's just powerful, too powerful. If somehow you can corral him, he can do a lot of good. Mm-hmm. But by nature, he's inclined to just destroy things.
Right.
That's what Adams' aristoi is like. It's like, the people in the Senate, you have to watch them. Right. Because if you don't watch them, they're going to destroy the whole thing. They're going to be inclined to work towards their own interests, not the benefit of others. But again, the position doesn't make sense because the people watching them are driven by passion. And if passion is attempting to check passion, the stronger passion is going to win. It just doesn't work. The system doesn't work. So I think Adams' argument is confused, massively confused.
Okay. Finally, what do we learn about each correspondent in this exchange?
Well, as I'm writing the book on all these topics, one of the things that occurs to me is both men are philosophical. That's what I love about reading them.
Mhm.
Adams is dilettantishly philosophical. He's a dilettante. He likes to bring up topics like, okay, talk about God. Can God do that? What is the nature of God? What is the nature of the natural? He brings up philosophically interesting topics. And then he says, well, we'll never understand this, right? When he talks about the natural aristoi, or he's talking about is life worth living? He goes, you can write volumes on this. You can write a book after book after book after book, and you'll never figure it out. So he likes to bring up philosophical topics about which he has no intention of resolving. It's sort of like he just is trying to tweak Jefferson's mind, get Jefferson's opinion. Jefferson, in contrast, is interested insofar as he can in resolving these issues.
Yeah.
Now, notice Jefferson doesn't argue for the natural aristoi. He just says the natural aristoi is talent and morality. Doesn't give an argument. It just is that way.
Right.
We all have
Maybe that's why he didn't respond. Maybe that's why you don't see as many letters from him.
I think you're right.
John Adams was spending too much time trying to change Thomas Jefferson's mind or convince him of something, and Thomas Jefferson's like, nope, I already said how I feel.
Well, he didn't say it, but he was afraid to say it because he knew Adams Adams is obsessed. He thinks he's got a trump card. Jefferson, if you look and you understand my argument, people have always been chosen wealth and birth, right? Which is true, right? So there can't be a government that like the one you're proposing because people are of such a nature. We're always going to choose good-looking people, wealthy people, people of noble blood. And Jefferson says, no, we're not.
Right.
Because we understand that your view of humanity is wrong, Adams. We're going to choose people who are moral. If we get rid of the biases in political structures, like education only for the wealthy, entails primogeniture, we get rid of religious biases, having Anglicanism be the state religion. We have education for all people. Then we can get Jefferson's system off the ground. Isn't this fascinating, though? This really gets at the heart of the differences between the two. So Adams is a philosophical dilettante. Jefferson thinks through these issues, I think, with much more thoroughly. He doesn't always find resolution on the topics, but he's interested in resolution. He's not. What I'm trying to say, Adams just wants to talk philosophy. Right. I'll give you an illustration. When I was teaching at Eastern Michigan, I got onto the elevator, and these two female students said, "You got to take so and so's class in philosophy."
Yeah.
And the other gal said, "Well, why?" "Oh, she brings up all interesting stuff and talking about all these fascinating issues and fine time, all these fascinating issues." And then the other gal says, "Okay, but what did you learn?" She goes, "That's philosophy. You're not supposed to learn anything. So you're just supposed to talk when you do philosophy. I don't do philosophy to talk. I do it to resolve issues. Resolution for me sometimes doesn't solve the problem, but it removes peripheral things."
Right. Right.
We know that John Adams' argument for natural aristoi doesn't work because it's just a confused argument. So Adams is out. The question is Jefferson's argument any better? Now, a couple other things. Adams is incoherent. Jefferson is coherent. Jefferson is patient. Adams is impatient. Adams is arrogant and confused.